My fingers hovered above the brass routing interface. The terminal bathed my gray uniform in harsh amber warning light. 52 alien warships held their breath in the void. I calculated the exact velocity of the Gull pursuit. I tapped a prime number sequence against my thigh. I finalized the burn order for the empty cruisers. They accelerated into the Gull flagship's throat. What happened next? I wish I could say it ended there. 3 hours earlier, the siren did not pulse. It wailed like a dying leviathan. The sound tore through the metal hull of the obsidian Aegis. It was a sound that meant death. I grabbed my survival kit. I sprinted toward the muster deck. I knew I did not belong there. I was a data analyst. I was a clerk. I was invisible. The muster deck was a sea of iridescent crests and polished armor. The mer officers stood in perfect rows. They were tall and beautiful and useless. Fleet Sovereign Vithin walked down the line. Her crest shifted in subtle annoyance. She stopped in front of me. She looked at my faded gray uniform. She looked at my lack of weapons. She did not speak. She simply walked past. To her, I was air. I was dust. I was nothing. I retreated to subdeck archival node 4. It was a converted ventilation nexus. It smelled of recycled coolant and old paper. It was my office. It was my prison. On my desk sat a heavy brass routing chip. It was obsolete. It was a dead node in a system that explicitly demanded my irrelevance. I picked it up. It was cold. It was heavy. It felt like hope. Braca entered the room. He was a Krellin maintenance chief. His silicate skin was scored with carbon burns. He chewed a synthetic carbon stick. The crunching sound was loud in the small space. He looked at me. He looked at the chip. "You are still here, human?" Braca asked. His voice was rough. It sounded like gravel grinding together. "Your kind usually quits. Boredom kills you faster than war." "I am working," I said. I did not look up. I was reading an old text. It was about naval history from Earth. 18th century, wooden ships, iron cannons, simple tactics. "Working on what?" Braca asked. He spat out a piece of the stick. "The Synod has not approved your lunch break yet." "The Synod requires 7 distinct bureaucratic approvals to alter a patrol vector," I said. I tapped a sequence on my thigh. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. 4 frigates vanished in the Thetis expanse this morning. The Synod is still debating the historical precedent for a rescue mission. Braca clicked his mandibles. It was a sound of pity, or maybe disgust. "Then they will die, and we will file the paperwork." He left. The door hissed shut. I was alone again. I looked at the brass chip. I looked at the screen. The Merfleet was a machine. It was powerful. It was vast, but it was slow. It needed permission to breathe. It needed permission to fight. I went back to my book. I read about trap lines. I read about feigned retreats. I read about how to break a formation that was too rigid to bend. I tapped my thigh. The numbers flowed. The odds were bad, but they were not 0. Then the ship shuddered. It was not a gentle shake. It was a violent kick. The lights flickered. The air pressure dropped. My ears popped. I stood up. I grabbed the desk to stay upright. The wailing siren started again, but this time it was cut short. Silence. Absolute terrifying silence. I ran to the comms panel. It was dead. The screen was black. I tried the secondary channel. Dead. I tried the emergency band. Dead. The Gull Vanguard had arrived. They did not send a message. They did not declare war. They sent a pulse. An electromagnetic suppression wave. It wiped out every active communication system on the Obsidian Aegis. It wiped out every ship in the fleet. 52 warships drifted in the dark, blind, deaf, alone. I looked at the brass chip. I looked at the port on my desk. It was an old port. It was for manual data overrides. It was shielded. It was analog. It was immune to the pulse. I plugged in the chip. The screen flickered. Green text scrolled across the black glass. It was slow. It was ugly. But it was alive. I accessed the tactical grid. I saw the battlefield. It was a mess of red dots and blue lines. The Gull ships were biomechanical nightmares. They moved in a swarm. They were fast. They were aggressive. They were closing in on the Merfleet. The Mer ships were frozen. Their commanders were waiting for orders. Their orders were not coming. The bridge was dark. The Fleet Sovereign was silent. I saw the pattern. The Gull were using a compression tactic. They were squeezing the center. They expected the Mer to hold the line. They expected protocol. They expected rigidity. They were wrong. I opened a broadcast channel. It was unverified. It was unauthorized. It was treason. I typed in the coordinates. I used the old naval codes. I used the language of wooden ships and iron cannons. I sent the signal. "Align to Vector 479er, I said. My voice was steady. "Hold fire, wait for my mark." On the tactical screen, I saw the response. Most ships ignored me. They were waiting for their captains. But one ship moved. The Solar Anvil. It was a heavy cruiser. Its shipmaster was Corax. He was stubborn. He was proud, but he was also desperate. A text box appeared on my screen. It was from Corax. "Who is this? Identify." I did not answer. I sent the next command. "Turn port 10 degrees. Now." Corax hesitated. I saw his ship drift. Then slowly it turned. He was testing me. He was seeing if I knew what I was doing. I did. I projected the gull arrival vector onto his console. I showed him the trap. I showed him the gap in their armor. Corax complied. The Solar Anvil moved. It broke formation. It drifted away from the main line. It looked like a mistake. It looked like panic. The gull swarm shifted. They saw the opening. They poured into the gap. They followed the Solar Anvil. They were predictable. They were hungry. They were blind to anything but the kill. I watched the screen. My heart beat in my throat. 1, 2, 3, I tapped my thigh. The rhythm kept me calm. The rhythm kept me sharp. More ships began to move. Small frigates, fast destroyers. They saw the Solar Anvil survive. They saw the gull follow. They started to align with my vector. It was not a command. It was a suggestion. But in the dark, a suggestion is enough. The gull swarm tightened. They were focused on the center. They were ignoring the flanks. They were ignoring the edges. They were walking into a snare. But I needed bait. I looked at the tactical map. 2 cruisers were crippled. The Iron Dawn, the Crimson Wake. Their engines were damaged. Their shields were failing. They were drifting. They were easy targets. I checked their telemetry. Life signs were low. Evacuation pods had launched. The ships were empty, ghosts. I made the choice. It was not a hard choice. It was a math problem. 2 empty ships for 52 living ones. I sent the command, Iron Dawn. Crimson Wake, full burn, forward. The 2 ships surged. They moved toward the Gull flagship. They moved toward the heart of the swarm. They were not attacking. They were sacrificing. Braca burst into the room. He was breathing hard. His mandibles were clicking rapidly. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Those are more ships. You cannot order them." "They are already dead," I said. I did not look at him. I watched the red dots converge. "I am just deciding how they die." Braca stared. His eyes widened. He saw the pattern. He saw the trap. He stopped shouting. He stepped back. He leaned against the wall. He watched in silence. He watched in terror. He watched in awe. The Gull flagship opened fire. Beams of green energy sliced through the dark. They hit the Iron Dawn. The ship broke apart. Metal twisted. Fire bloomed in the vacuum. It was beautiful. It was horrible. The Crimson Wake kept moving. It took the hits. It kept burning. It got closer, closer, closer. The Gull swarm was confused. They had never seen this. They had never seen ships that did not fight back. They had never seen ships that wanted to die. Their rigid minds could not process it. Their doctrine had no answer for suicide. The Crimson Wake hit the flagship. The explosion was silent, but I felt it. The whole ship shook. The holographic feed shattered into static, then it cleared. The Gull flagship was gone. In its place was a cloud of debris and biomatter. The swarm stalled. The red dots scattered. They panicked. They broke formation. They turned and ran. The Merfleet was safe. I sat back in my chair. My hands were shaking. I stopped tapping my thigh. The silence returned. But this time it was different. It was the silence of victory. The lights came back on. The comms crackled to life. Voices shouted. Orders were given. Panic turned to relief. Relief turned to confusion. Who had saved them? I unplugged the brass chip. I held it in my hand. It was warm now. It had done its job. The door opened. 2 more guards entered. They were armed. They were stern. They looked at me. "Specialist Silas Thorne," one said. "You are under arrest for unlawful command usurpation. Come with us." I stood up. I smoothed my gray uniform. I did not resist. I walked out of the archival node. I walked through the corridors. I walked past the officers who had ignored me. They looked at me now. They looked at me with fear. They looked at me with wonder. I was taken to the tribunal chamber. It was a large room. It was cold. Tribune Voss sat at the head of the table. He was a legalist. He was strict. He was angry. "You violated protocol," Voss said. His voice was sharp. "You bypassed the chain of command. You sacrificed more property. You acted without authority. How do you plead?" I looked at him. I looked at the fleet sovereign. She stood in the shadows. She was watching. "I plead efficient," I said. Voss slammed his hand on the table. Efficiency is not an excuse for mutiny. Is it not? The voice came from the shadows. Fleet Sovereign Vithin stepped forward. Her crest was bright, it shimmered with light. She looked at Voss, she looked at me. The Gull are retreating, she said. The fleet is intact. The command bridge was silent, the archives were not. She walked to the table. She placed a hand on the brass chip. I had left it there. This device, she said. It is obsolete, it is slow, it is ugly, but it worked. She looked at me. Her eyes were hard, but they were respectful. We require 7 approvals to change a course, she said. The Gull require none. We must learn, we must adapt. Specialist Thorn, you are no longer a clerk. You are a strategist. You will report to the primary deck. You will teach us how to bleed. Voss opened his mouth to protest. Vithin raised a hand. He closed it. I bowed. It was a small bow. But it was enough. I left the chamber. I walked to the primary strategy deck. It was huge. It was bright. It was full of screens and maps and people. They parted for me. They made way. I found a console. It was new. It was sleek. It was powerful. I placed the brass routing chip on the desk. It looked out of place. It looked small, but it was important. Every dead node is merely waiting for the proper voltage to ignite the network. I sat down. I looked at the star map. The Gull were gone, but they would return. They always returned. And next time we would be ready. Next time we would not wait for permission. I tapped my thigh. 1, 2, 3. The rhythm was different now. It was not a countdown. It was a heartbeat. The screen glowed. The fleet waited, and I began to work.